Hi learners, welcome to the second part of the explanation on making comments on a character. By the end of the lecture, learners should be able to identify the traits in characters and make comments on a character. So, let's continue with the second step. What is the next step in making the commentary? Once you have ideas on the types of characters, it's time for you to select a character in an English movie. Select only one. Why? Because your presentation is only 5 minutes and one type is enough. For example, you could choose the protagonist or the antagonist. So these two characters are the easiest ones to comment on. Then, after deciding on the character, you need to determine the possible trait that the character has. While watching the movie, observe one obvious trait that you can notice. These are examples of good traits that most protagonists have. However, there are cases where the protagonist has bad traits because the protagonist is a bad person. Like, for example, in the movie Psycho, Norman Bates, who is the protagonist in the movie Psycho, kills the travelers who spend the night at his motel. He is an evil protagonist, and he shows many bad traits which are in line with his character as a villain protagonist. What if you decide to comment on the antagonist in a movie? So let's take a look at the possible traits in an antagonist. These are examples of traits in an antagonist that you can use. Once you have identified the trait, you can start doing the comments. You need to justify your comment on the character's trait so that your comments are convincing. Let me show you one example of commentary on the character that you could do. Step 4. Let's make comments on a character. We will discuss one example from a movie. Let me show you how you can make comments on a character in a movie, and I'm going to take the movie entitled Hacksaw Ridge as an example. Have you watched this movie? Hacksaw Ridge. So this is the protagonist in the movie. And I'm going to focus my comments on the protagonist. If you haven't watched this movie, please find time to watch and you find my explanation easier to be understood. Okay? Right. Hacksaw Ridge is based on a true story about Private Desmond Doss, who joined the American Army as a medic and refused to carry a rifle. So it may sound funny, but this happened. Okay, this is a true story. He refused to kill, and this created conflicts in the movie. However, during the Battle of Okinawa, his belief in avoiding killing put him in a dilemma, but he managed to resolve it. He bravely rescued about 75 men without holding a rifle. He carried a wounded soldier one at a time to the edge of the cliff and lowered him down the cliff so that he could be saved by the American armies who were waiting down the cliff. In this movie, the protagonist is Desmond Doss. So in my opinion, the protagonist is a determined person. So this is the trait that I have identified. He is a determined person who stands for what he believed. The obstacles that he faced in the movie convinced me that he was a determined person. For example, when he was bullied and beaten by his fellow soldiers for his unacceptable belief. Private Doss didn't change his mind. He was not scared of the threats and was determined to hold on to his belief. So this shows how determined he was. Another person who couldn't accept his belief is his sergeant, who threatened to terminate Doss if he refused to hold a weapon. The sergeant brought his case to the army court, but he was acquitted. And this proves how determined he was in facing the trial and mistreatment from his superior. His determination helped him in deciding during the peak of the story. He had to decide whether to use the rifle that he had to shoot the enemies so that he can protect the sergeant who mistreated him, or to keep holding to his belief. That was the hardest time to decide because it involves the life of a sergeant, a human being. However, because Doss was so determined, he managed to find an alternative on how to save the sergeant's life. Instead of shooting, he used the rifle to pull the sergeant near to the edge of the cliff so that he can lower him down to safety. If he wasn't a determined person, I think that he would use the rifle to shoot the enemies, since at that crucial moment, the best way to use the rifle was to shoot the enemies. So that is how you can make comments on a character in the movie. And in my example, I have chosen the protagonist in the movie Hacksaw Ridge. Okay, that is all for our first lesson today. Let's do the activity